Hello, everybody. My name is James Rosenstein. I am a member of the board of One Business World. Our event, the Global Young Entrepreneurs of the World Conference, is a virtual gathering of aspiring young entrepreneurs from any field of study and global experts sharing sound business advice. It's a great pleasure to introduce you to Kayla Isabelle, the CEO of Startup Canada, and she's going to tell us about how to start your first business. Kayla, I hand over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, James. And thanks everyone for having me on this fabulous Friday. So hello, everyone. As James just said, my name is Kayla Isabelle, and I'm the CEO of an organization called Startup Canada. And today we're going to be talking about how to start your first business. Obviously, I'm biased, but being in the entrepreneurship space, having the autonomy and the ability to create your own future, solve the world's most pressing challenges, and contribute in a very meaningful way is a huge opportunity for anyone globally. So we're very passionate about entrepreneurship here at Startup Canada at any age. So really excited about letting you know some of the offerings we have, walking through a bit of process, and making sure that you have the tools that you need to start that first business. So before we get into today's presentation, I'd like to quickly do a land acknowledgement. The land that I am residing on today is located on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We recognize the inherent and treaty rights of all Indigenous peoples, and we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territories of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. As I mentioned, Startup Canada is really the gateway to Canada's entrepreneurship ecosystem. So when you think, I just have this, idea, I don't even know if it's a business idea yet. You can essentially come to Startup Canada and we help connect you with all of the resources that you need to bring that nugget of an idea into fruition as an actual business. We do this by connecting founders. We call founders, anyone starting a business, with tools, with different types of community. That can be regional, that can be based on industry, stage of business, and ultimately support that helps them start and build their business from the sort of strongest base foundation. So we play that connector role, that convener role, and ultimately we support just over 140,000 founders every single year. So lots of great business ideas coming our way. In today's session, we're going to cover a few main topics. We're going to look at the ecosystem at large. And while Canada, I think, has a very competitive and really robust startup ecosystem, many of the parallels that we see in our ecosystem can also be extrapolated internationally. So we see similar trends happening globally, particularly in the US, but we'll talk sort of generally around what's changed in the last couple of years as well. Obviously, the pandemic threw a couple of wrenches our way, but we saw huge moments for founders during that time. We'll also talk about the DNA of an entrepreneur. And while a business idea is a hugely important part of a business, you'll often hear the feedback from investors or from those that are looking to be inspired by that topic or idea. It really comes down to the founder and the entrepreneur behind that business, and your unique ability to tap into your entrepreneurial skill set and ultimately drive this business forward. We'll also talk about some discovery skills and business case studies from Startup Canada's network that show what the process is to even explore that initial business foundational idea. Often, we see these businesses erupt and disrupt and scale internationally. And there's a secret sauce there. There's some kind of magic that exists within that business structure. These 4 discovery skills kind of showcase why some of the world's leading innovators have been built from a particular perspective. So we'll walk through some really practical tips there. We'll also have some time for Q&A, as James mentioned, so happy to answer any questions at the end of today's session. So in terms of the opportunity, in Canada alone, 2 million new businesses were born during the pandemic. And this is out of necessity because there was something, a new challenge that founders were trying to solve. Many of us were working remotely, and platforms like Zoom really exploded because of a desperate and dire need to provide tools and resources right away to companies across the entire world. Also, people were laid off, and that continues to happen, particularly in the tech space. We see constant influx of entrepreneurship out of necessity. And that has been something that is very important to recognize, that some, founders are entering into this space because they have to put, food on the table, and they have to find gainful employment. Entrepreneurship is a great way of putting that energy and intention right directly into your business that you also own, and giving yourself that equity in your own future during challenging circumstances as well. So this is essentially a moment, an opportunity, and a community that is learning about entrepreneurship on the fly and really trying to disrupt particular spaces as of 2023 and finding those unique opportunities. We do a national Startup Canada census each year that gives us also a couple of indications of different trends that we're seeing. So we're seeing booming support from Gen Z and millennials looking to entrepreneurship as a viable career option. That was not the case 10 or 15 years ago. But now there is this, sexiness around entrepreneurship, and people really want to be in this space. So we're seeing a huge movement in younger generations to be attracted to that entrepreneurial opportunity. We're also seeing a tremendous number of women engaging in this space, which is very encouraging. We don't see enough funding flowing to women-led ventures, but we are seeing many businesses leverage women's insight, the particular skill sets that women have. Various industries that are often women-led have started to increase and really exploded. And some new evolved businesses in areas like femtech. So solving challenges that women uniquely face in various industries as well. On the incorporated side, we see about 3 out of 5 businesses incorporated in that first stage. And that loops us to some of the business fundamentals. Yes, you have an idea, but there are legal parts of building a business. There are contracts and areas that you want to make sure you have a super solid foundation on. Being incorporated is one of those main steps. And as we see businesses start to emerge and evolve, that incorporation number will hopefully increase as those businesses solidify. A quick note around Startup Canada's programming. We've got lots of different programs. If anyone from around the world wants to participate, come on over. We've got our Startup Women program, Startup Global, Startup Gov, which is a bit of an advocacy-focused program. Our Startup Canada tour brings all of these initiatives across the country to 5 different destinations across Canada, and our podcast and Business Owners Toolbox. For today's conversation and within this international audience that we have here today, all of our digital programs and our Business Owners Toolbox is completely accessible and free to any founder who wants to listen to the podcast, engage online with us and through social media, and leverage some of those foundational resources. They are all Canadian-centric, so some of the information might not be relevant, but it gives you a really good understanding of those business fundamentals. So as I mentioned, the DNA of an entrepreneur is an essential ingredient to building and coming up with that sort of initial idea that you want to bring into this world. And often there are, so many different words and characteristics that we talk about when we talk about entrepreneurship. But I always come back to this one question: what do all successful entrepreneurs have in common? And that is a bias for action. It is not necessarily the best business idea. It's not money necessarily in that beginning stage. It's not coming from a particular city or area of the world. All successful entrepreneurs have a bias for action. They have an appetite and a momentum and a passion to really drive their business idea forward, to wean out that competition and to really stand out in a super saturated market that we find ourselves in now. And that's in any type of industry. So when you're thinking about starting your first business, do you have a bias for action when it comes to this particular idea? Does it get you moving? Does it get you super excited to build, explore, to be challenged constantly by? How do you feel about that bias for action in those initial building blocks? We also have a number of qualities of an entrepreneur that are often some of those other essential ingredients. So you've got this great bias for action. You also need responsibility, an approach of abundance. You need to be super goal-oriented and not fear of failure, because every single entrepreneur in every part of their journey often fails. You'll hear this from some of the most successful CEOs of large, super innovative companies. Being courageous, decisive, growth-oriented. This list goes on and on. But I challenge all of you right now to take a moment and look at 3 qualities that you think you have. You're thinking of, building a business. You're exploring if you're the right entrepreneurial fit. What 3 qualities on this list do you feel that you have? Write it down. Take a moment, put it on a Post-it, or just think, to yourself. And on the flip side, if you take a secondary moment of pause, what 3 qualities do you not have, but you feel you could cultivate and develop? These are all of these attributes are not finite. You can build your ability to be comfortable with discomfort. You can build your ability to be a problem solver and to be focused and tenacious. All of these areas are coachable, are learnable, and are areas that you can develop over the life cycle of being a founder and entrepreneur. So take a moment to sort of set 3 of these qualities that you might want to work through as a part of building that first business. So as I mentioned, we were going to go through some discovery skills for innovation and entrepreneurialism. And obviously having a great business idea is part of this equation. And we constantly see different business ideas pivot and shift to respond to different market needs. Obviously, the economy has changed so much over the last few years in particular. And with digitization and exploring just the shifts we see in our world, things like climate change, et cetera. And we see businesses being built for very different purposes. But as you're exploring all of these different factors, it's helpful to anchor in 4 of these discovery skills for that innovation kind of mindset, that mindset of entrepreneurialism that can really anchor you as you're in that exploration, so that you're not just thinking into all of these different directions. And this framework is inspired by the work of Harvard Business Review. So a really great resource if anybody's looking for long form copy, lots of entrepreneurial and innovation related content with what we call HBR. And a study that they did about 20 years ago, actually, called the Innovator's DNA. Many of these topics and frameworks last a very long time. The ideas and the case studies may change as the environment evolves, but the work of Jeffrey Dyer, Hal Gregerson, and Clayton Christensen, I think really stands true when it comes to building that foundational philosophy around entrepreneurship. So the first discovery skill that I recommend any aspiring entrepreneur to have is called associating. And associating is the ability to successfully connect seemingly completely unrelated questions, problems, or ideas from different fields, and that being very central to an innovator's DNA. And this is a concept from Harvard Business Review. There's this phenomenon called the Medici effect that some of you may have heard at school or externally. And this refers to this sort of creative explosion that happened during the Renaissance in Florence, when you had sculptors and artists and scientists and all of these different groups, poets, writers, architects, those were much more science-based or creative. And you had all of these people in one space at one time. So all of these seemingly unrelated industries or mindsets or sort of perspectives. But all of these individuals really came together and new ideas blossomed from bringing together that intersection of multidisciplinary functions. And that is ultimately what spawned the Renaissance, which is arguably one of the most inventive and entrepreneurial eras that we've ever seen. So when you think of your business, how are you looking at different unrelated potential questions that you might have to really get to the crux of an interesting problem that you are going to solve with your business? So think of a couple of case studies. We've got eBay and Apple being 2 really great case studies here. So for eBay, Pierre, the founder, had an incredible fascination with creating a more efficient marketplace and just the efficiency of that, having been shut out of a couple of different IPOs in the mid-1990s. His fiance was also obsessed with finding hard to find collectible Pez dispensers, seemingly completely unrelated sort of areas of that business. And he was also interested in the ineffectiveness of local classified ads, so things that were potentially printed out in the paper, to actually find some of those items. So take those three completely unrelated areas, pop them all together, and you have one of the most innovative companies of my generation, eBay, creating that marketplace in that space. Same thing with Steve Jobs. He looked at and loved the art of calligraphy. And if you've ever read any of his biographies, he had a passion for art and for that type of kind of creative explosion. He also looked at meditation practices and also wanted to be, incredibly polished, and was super inspired by the Mercedes-Benz. All of this helped inform the products that Apple has created and really dominated the market in. So when you think of that initial business, how are you bringing together and associating various unrelated passions of yours, problems that you want to solve, or potentially co-founders or a network of advisors that you think would be helpful in really creating this interesting business? A second discovery skill is questioning. And every aspiring entrepreneur should be riddled with questions. Why do we do it this way? Why do we, operate or use this particular tool? And this is something that you can do in traditional organizations as well, to really challenge the status quo. And this is where the bright, disruptive ideas come from. Peter Drucker has a really fantastic quote that's: "The important and difficult job is never to find the right answers. It is to find the right question." And that is where the really secret magic sauce of entrepreneurship comes out, when people find very interesting and unique questions that then they can answer through their business. So prompting yourself with why? Why not? What if? Think of the founders of Uber asking, why can't we use other people's cars and organize rides similar to, a taxi service, but leveraged through an app? Think of all of the disruptive, tech companies or businesses that you think of that have done something brand new. They asked, why do we have to do something a particular way? Why not disrupt this industry? And what if this was actually possible? How do we explore that realm and what we think is possible within our current context? We've seen lots of different examples of this across Startup Canada's programs. A great example is the incredible legal firm called Willful. And their business essentially came out of a huge sort of problem, I guess, in the Canadian space, where over half of Canadians do not have a will. So when you pass away, you have a will saying all of my, assets and everything that I own is going to go to certain people. And the problem that solves is, if you do not have a will, there's no legal way for you to allocate those desires and wishes of where you would like both your money and your assets to go to. It becomes very complicated. So through this exploration, they had no specialized expertise in law or in this space at all, or in, death or any of those areas. They asked, why haven't more Canadians developed a will? It came out of a personal experience that one of the founders had a family member who didn't have a will. And that made him very curious. Why not make end-of-life planning easier? Why not explore this as a viable business option to try to help other Canadians solve this problem? And then revolutionizing the legal space. What if we made this available online? A lot of legal procedural documentation happens, at a lawyer's office, in person. We've seen that dramatically change in the last couple of years. So they questioned this entire space, and through a lived experience, through a curiosity, and through intersecting and associating many seemingly unrelated ideas and personal experiences, they came up with an incredibly disruptive technology and offering to the Canadian public that now has created tens of thousands of wills and solved a very specific problem in our market. So a great example of questioning the status quo and seeing what is possible. We also have another discovery skill called observing. Obviously, that's a pretty simple concept, but some of the best business ideas come out of observing very business as usual types of things that happen in our world. That could be inefficiencies we see in our world. That can be different relationships we see forming, or different spaces that gather different types of people. And the Intuit founder, Scott Cook, positions this as often the surprises that lead to new business ideas come from watching other people work and live their normal lives. You see something and ask, why did they do that? That doesn't make sense as well. You see the inefficiency in these moments that are ripe for disruption in just observing your natural day-to-day life at a coffee shop or watching what happens in any type of environment. One of my favorite examples of co-founders that have done this in the Startup Canada community is an organization called Off the Grid. And they are a Quebec-based company that is dedicated to providing eco-responsible training equipment. So they were observing gyms, regular gyms that had treadmills and bicycles and rowing machines and all of these different pieces of technology. And they thought, why not disrupt this space and turn all of that energy that we're creating by using these different tools and these different exercise equipment and actually turn that energy into electricity that goes into the grid of the gym that could ultimately power the gym and offset the carbon footprint of every single gym that exists across Canada. So this is paired with an app that gives you real-time data on the consumption reduction, data usage overall collected, general impact of each workout. So there's the practical functionality of getting that practical info. And then they're targeting high waste buildings. So think, large gyms, hotels, community centers where you have that critical mass of lots of people coming in and being able to harness that energy. So they are solving sustainable development goals. They are using the energy of what has already existed and just making it more efficient. And they're ultimately creating a very interesting business that has a unique value proposition as well. Work out, feel good, do good for the planet. And ultimately, that just came from observing the inefficiency of people at the gym. Why not use that energy that's already being expended? So lots of different, really great innovative examples that come from that space. The final element of these discovery skills is experimenting. And this is where the magic happens as well. Thomas Edison, famous quote, "I haven't failed. I've simply found 10,000 ways that do not work." You see this every day as an entrepreneur. Your first business idea will most likely not be your last business idea. You see many entrepreneurs iterate through different business structures and audience groups and target markets and even exporting into different countries to make sure that their product is going to land to the right consumer. Entrepreneurship is about constant iteration. It's about evolution. And it is essential to not hold on and grip that foundational business idea too hard at the expense of serving your audience more thoroughly and more thoughtfully as you naturally learn what they need. So being open to that experimentation, to building that iterative mindset, and to really focusing on this experimentation part is a huge part of building a business. Key examples of this: Twitter, Amazon, eBay. If you look at any of their foundational platforms that they had back in the day, they look nothing like what they are today. Twitter was a completely different platform. Amazon used completely different functionalities and was just for books. And likewise with eBay, it started with very niche markets. So this iterative improvement, we see it with the biggest tech companies, and it's also a very important personality and sort of thinking attribute that you have to make sure that you are not sort of pigeonholing yourself into areas that don't work. Because we often see entrepreneurs feel very connected to their ideas, and there's a lot of pride that gets connected there. Try to relinquish some of that control and be open to what comes your way. So to round out the conversation, yes, you've got these great discovery skills, you're inspired, you've got this nugget of a business idea. What are the concrete tools that are going to get you from that business incubation into actually setting up your first business? So there are a couple of things to know around that process. And it comes down, in my mind, to strong fundamentals and strong foundations. I'll go through a couple of Startup Canada's resources that we can leverage there. I recommend having lots of industry-specific education. You do not need to be an expert in the industry that you're coming into. And this often surprises people thinking, oh, I'm not an engineer. I'm not, in the health science space. How could I possibly look to disrupt those spaces? Sometimes some of those best association, framework elements that we've just chatted through come from people outside of the industries that actually have that lived experience, because you're approaching that problem solving from a completely different way. So there's a way for you to bridge and make sure that you are aware and understand that industry, but by no means do you have to be an expert before jumping into that specific industry. It's also important to understand your digital tools and overall skills. This is huge during COVID-19, and literacy around using tools like project management tools and accounting software, and some of those really important efficiency markers that will help you propel your business faster by doing smarter, making smarter decisions and working in a more smart way. And that will serve you if you're leveraging an e-commerce platform, if you're looking at payment processors, if you're building CRMs or databases of information, and looking at automation. AI is a huge part of this conversation now when it wasn't, 10 years ago. So making sure that you have a solid understanding of those digital tools is super important. And then lastly, mentorship and having an empowering community around you. You are not going to know everything on day one. You're not going to be a perfect entrepreneur. Nobody is. But what you can do is leverage the insights of people around you, founders that have been where you have been and who have learned the lessons the hard way. There's no reason why you can't learn those lessons by proximity instead of having that lived experience yourself and going through some of those challenging moments. So find mentors, find advisors, and find different types of communities that might be challenging your assumptions and stretching your ability to think. A fantastic tool as well to get you started, it's completely free, it's on Startup Canada's website, is called the Business Owner's Toolbox. And to my point earlier, yes, you have that great business idea, but you have to really focus on those business fundamentals. This is a tool that provides a central hub, a comprehensive package from pre-launch to shipping, pitching, finances, everything you need to know to start a business in Canada. So that comes down to business structures. Are you building a for-profit business or a nonprofit business? Do you need insurance? Are you navigating through a particular regulatory environment if you are in the health space, for example? What legal documents do you have? How are you incorporating? Is that provincial or territorial or national rather? How are you going to sell? What are your marketing channels? What are the costs of building a website and accessing a domain name? What are you going to do when making that first hire? What are some of the HR implications of bringing in contractors or other folks? And then finding information around finances. This is the number one area that founders are often struggled with. Having a relationship with your bank, looking at different financial institutions, lenders, investors, angels. There's lots of really great information and a bit of a glossary of terms to get comfortable with that financial space, because that's a huge area for entrepreneurs. So feel free to jump in, see lots of different tools, and continue to come back to it through different stages of your journey. Another illustration, as I mentioned earlier, this is going to look slightly different in every country, but there are tremendous number of ecosystem support partners and entrepreneurship ecosystem players that exist within each country. So there are groups like incubators, accelerators that help you really form your ideas and develop formal programming that bring you through all of those different foundational elements. There's different support organizations, policy groups that advocate on your behalf, different finance folks like venture capitalists, looking at crowdfunding sources and looking at all that different type of financing, different networks, different talent sources. And what I recommend to each of you is to have a really good understanding of what that network is. There are different groups like Startup Canada that exist in every country to help you navigate through these various supports. But do not enter into this alone. You don't have to. There are a tremendous number of supports out there that are helping founders just like you. So I hope that was a helpful presentation. I know it's a lot of information to share all at once, but happy to jump into some Q&A.
Well, Kayla, thank you very much. This is really an impressive approach to this whole issue. It's quite something, and it should help a lot of people who want to get into their own business. That's really good. Out of curiosity, among all the people who are setting up businesses, are there specific areas of focus with more attention?
I think it depends. Different countries have different types of business focuses. So in Canada right now, the innovation agenda is huge. So if you're building a business that is scalable, that is really disrupting a traditional industry, and that has a lot of potential around sustainable development as well, if it has, a climate change focus, et cetera, or something that aligns to what we call the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals that are mandated by the UN. Lots of support for innovation groups there. And I'd say in Canada, focus on women founders. There's a lot of support right now in both supporting and scaling women-led ventures. They perform better. The returns are often higher from an investor perspective. And we recognize that there's not a proportionate allocation of resources, money, support, et cetera, going to women-led founders.
Fantastic. Well, we thank you very much for this presentation and look forward to staying in touch. There will be other opportunities to explain this to other groups, and we much appreciate that. So thank you very much and look forward to our next contact.
Okay. Thanks, James. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.